moving around. We move around quickly to different tables. In order, straight off the menu, so I can't pick any better. No wisdom there. I don't really good. Yeah, it's pretty good. I think everyone's done. I didn't overthought it. Oh man, it's been a real roller coaster. We're off to it. Yeah, okay. Oh man. I was struggling to find it, and then I finally did. I was like, "Oh, great!" And then literally you came in and said, "I'm good."
Yeah, because they were just there. Well, what is that?
Barcelona about 37 and yeah, nice. Thank you. Got a newly formed for work alums in the audience. Yeah, a lot of new folks. So, right up the west coast, San Francisco, Seattle. Yeah, right. No. Yeah, I think it's yeah. Are you? Yeah, okay, listen.
So what happened?
Right, right. Our son lived in Boston. Our oldest son, he was now, yeah. You see it online. Yeah. And also that newsletter. He got that. We got a big deal. Starting. Someone may not live there. I don't know. Yeah, that's it this morning. Yeah. Scott Anita is also a new strength member. Scott is part of the band team at Tito. Yeah, I didn't so I was yeah, I know. No, every time I start. Yeah. No, I mean we don't have that. But he's still involved in the same work. These days are being made by Samsung. Yeah. Yeah, it's really fabulous. Very modern. A lot of young people. Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean the whole place, everything. Big, I think of these companies, they build big. Yep, exactly. One year before whenever if you want to send me that, I can talk about it. Yeah, 67. We're getting blue now. Oh, nice. Perfect. Trying to use the center pattern. Yeah. Thank you. Mike, hey, I'm Nelson myself. Okay. I'm an architect. I came back here from Seattle. Okay. Yep. Yeah, nice to say the name. All right, thanks for coming. I know. Normally I would be matching, and every time it didn't happen. More than Harry. No. That's a joke. They just like stand underneath a watering can. Whoa, look at that. There's people in the back. Help yourself with drinks back there. I think we talked about getting you guys kind of going like quickly. No, I think it's going. Yeah. You guys want to? As long as they don't lock it down, I can get out. Oh, I ate better. I would have. Thank you. You're moved over here. If you're okay with that. Right, Charlie. So I think we're gonna get started here in a minute. Charlie's gonna say action, and then we're just gonna all do it. It's gonna be amazing.
Over there for me.
Did I get you
No, I get one thing right by there.
I get a soda.
She's a
Ready? Are you Nathan?
I'm Nathan.
Hi, Nathan. Yeah, you can come sit right here. Joe is going to join you. All right. All right, Charlie, we're ready. Yep. Good to go. All right. Welcome, everybody. Capacity audience here tonight for the Ward 6 NPA coming back in September. Excited that you all joined us. Thank you so much. For those who aren't with us in person, there's pizza here tonight and drinks, so that's pretty great. Hopefully we can lure you down to the building next time. Relatively brief agenda tonight, but important topics. So we're going to kind of jump right into it. We start these meetings with a public forum, open for any announcements that anyone here has in person. Our friend Sam at CETO is helping to monitor the Zoom room. So if you have a comment, please raise your hand. Let us know. Yes.
I don't know if this is a comment or if this is a question. I wonder if there are any updates about the pit downtown.
I'm not aware of any updates on the pit downtown. There may be some other folks here in attendance who are more familiar with what's going on down there. Anyone? I'm sorry. This is a topic that comes up regularly on the agenda, so we'll make a note and try to get that on the agenda soon. It is still a hole.
He fills in water now.
Yes, please.
So I just wanted to, say my name. I really just wanted the record to show a commendation and thank you to the crew who is taking care of the Rotary construction, which I walk by there every day, and every member of that construction crew has been amazingly friendly through the most excruciatingly hot days.
Oh my gosh.
Even last year during super cold days, and I just am amazed by how they have been very intrepid and brave every day, early in the morning, late at night. And the project is looking really good, and I hear it's on schedule. So I just think it's amazing, and they're doing an awesome job.
Yes, they are.
You're here. Thank you. That's yeah, couldn't agree more. Thank you for that comment. I don't see any other hands. I don't see any comments online. I do want to take a minute. There's Dan Hill of Burlington Public Works was not able to be here tonight. He is the traffic manager and had an important announcement to note that we're in dire need of crossing guards. So I think we're going to try to maybe if we can put the flyer up for a minute on the screen. Call to action if you're available and interested. We could use you. And as a parent to two young girls who are crossing Shelburne Road to Champlain every day, it's a really important job. We will make that flyer. There's a flyer that posted with more information. We'll make that available in the minutes, posted to the website. I also wanted to note that we have three new steering committee members here with us tonight. We have another, I actually don't know if I see Nancy joined. Oh, there she is, Nancy. Hi, I can see you. So we have four new steering committee members here. So Mills Forney, Uta Regan, Anita Rapone, and Nancy Harkins is joining us virtually. There's another steering committee member, Dale Azaria, who is traveling and not here tonight. She and I was a committee of two for a while. We're happy to be a committee of six, and we'll take a formal vote next meeting for the four new prospective members. So thank you all for the effort so far, and look forward to hosting these with you in the future. Any other comments for public forum?
Oh, if I may.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to introduce to myself and most of you. My name is Scott Rogers. I'm a recently hired Community Development Manager. We work with my colleague Sam to support the NPAs, and I'm looking forward to getting to know more about your work and about your neighborhoods. And I will get you my phone number and email and look to keep the conversation going. Thank you.
Welcome. Yeah, thank you, Scott. Okay, with that, I'm going to go right into the first agenda topic because that's an important one. We have some, I don't know if I actually, I see Claire on the line here. So we have some of our school board members joining us, Claire Wool. I don't see Jeff Wick.
Texted, said he's a couple minutes away. So
Okay, great. But I also have here with us Nathan Lavery and Joe Wythe, part of the team. And we're going to get an update on kind of where we are in the status of the new high school.
Great. Yeah, and do you folks have the presentation that you can put up for folks on screen?
Oh, it's a Greek church.
Like two different PDFs, right?
Yeah, one is a presentation and I think one is just a one-page flyer, right?
Probably.
Yeah.
I do have with me, for the folks in the room anyway, some handouts.
Okay, great.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
So. Sure. So my name is Nathan Lavery. I work for the Burlington School District as the Executive Director of Finance and Operations for the district. Joe?
And I'm Joe White. I'm with White and Burke Real Estate Advisors. We are the project manager working with the district on this. The high school and tech center.
And while we get the presentation set up, which we'll run through briefly, we'll circulate two documents. One is kind of a one-page summary of the project, and another document is a list of some of the most common questions that we get. So it's kind of a frequently asked questions document. So thank you.
I think we've got the presentation up.
Okay,
So
awesome.
you're ready.
So we will move quickly through this, try to leave some time for questions. I think we have what, 20 to 30 minute range?
Yep,
Just want to,
Yep.
so you can keep us. in
I'll
check.
keep you on track. We're aiming for a 7 o'clock
Yeah.
to move on to the next topic. So,
Okay,
go ahead.
so, right, so we're gonna give folks a brief update on the status of the project to build a new high school and tech center, primarily at 52 Institute Road. We call it the BHS BTC 2025 project. So if we go to the next slide, I'll just go over a really brief history of the project. In short, folks may remember that we had a plan to renovate the high school on Institute Road. During the infancy of that work, after we got a public bond vote for funds to do that work, there a handful of things came up, but the most kind of high profile one was the presence of PCBs in the building materials and then ultimately in the air, which caused, based on consultations with the state, caused the school to be closed. Students vacated. Ultimately, as many people know, we're now in the former home of Macy's in downtown Burlington. One of the things I just want to quickly touch on here, because some people say, and it's on the frequently asked questions document, what happened to that $70 million? the shorter answer is we spent only about 4 million on preliminary design work all the way up through and including all the testing and work done to determine the presence of the PCBs, how widespread they were, and ultimately the assessment that trying to rebuild or remediate the PCBs from that building and reoccupy it would be a big waste of money. So the balance of that money, we never accessed. So some folks I've heard in the community like, oh, we just spent 70 million and now we need to spend a lot more. That's not accurate. We actually have only spent about 4 million. And thankfully, if there's a silver lining to that, most of that money actually offered some value to this project by allowing us to understand the site and the contamination on site. So that's a brief history of kind of where we were ultimately. Welcome, Jeff. Come on up. Just going over a brief history here. So we pivoted to the need to design a project to build a new high school and tech center. And we went through a process to determine, first of all, whether or not it should be located in the same place. We explored a lot of different opportunities, including some of those downtown sites that have proven problematic. Ultimately, it was determined that the best option was to rebuild on Institute Road for a number of reasons, which I'll spare you tonight, but know that there was a thorough process, a kind of site selection process that went into picking the site. So if we can go on to the next slide, please. The school board ultimately had a series of designs, options, kind of conceptual options created from which to choose for the design of the new high school. And that selection was made earlier this year. It was, I think, a choice that, and Jeff can speak to this in more detail, but ultimately it was probably the most compact and it was the cheapest option of them all. That's not to say it was a cheap building, but rather to say that it was probably the most cost-effective way to provide the space that we needed. Subsequent to that, we have been working both on efforts to design the new high school and efforts to fundraise further money to reduce the burden on taxpayers of the total project. So that work is ongoing. And if there's questions about that, we can go into a little more detail. So working on design, working on bringing new money into the project, and then also working on reducing the cost of the project, right? And one of the major ways that we identified to reduce the cost of the project is to relocate some of the tech center programs up to the airport. We're able to do that because we were awarded a $10 million grant in thanks in large part to the effort of Senator Leahy and his team to expand our aviation focused programs at the airport. Folks may or may not know that we actually have had an aviation and aeronautics program at the airport, which is really cool. This is going to allow us to grow and expand that and potentially collaborate not only with the Burlington International Airport, but also in particular with Beta Technologies up there. So by removing those spaces, using separate funds to pay for those spaces at the airport, it reduces the cost of the project on Institute Road. So where we are now in the process and what we're going to get into is we've completed what's called the schematic design phase. You're going to see some images of what the high school could conceptually look like here, and know that a big part of that project was then to estimate the cost of that design. We went through a thorough cost estimating process with 2 different firms doing estimates so that we could bring them together and be confident in them. And ultimately, that cost estimate put us in a realm where, after you subtract the other money that we've brought to the table, both from funds that we've identified within our own budget, reallocated capital funds, and obviously you've probably heard that we've allocated a major share of our federal kind of recovery funds to this project. So it's brought us to a point where we still need an estimated $165 million bond, and that is what is going to be on the ballot in November. So hopefully that kind of brings people in brief right up to speed of where we are today. And I believe I'm going to turn it over to Joe now just to give folks a few highlights of the site plan and the design of the building. Go, sorry, next slide.
Okay, so so this is the site plan for the new high school and tech center. So our plan is to demolish and remediate all of the hazardous materials that are in the existing buildings. Do that before we start construction of the new school. So the plan right now is to start the abatement work and demolition work in either December or January, get most of that done so that the site is ready for new construction in, July of August of next year. So the building is, it's planned to be approximately 260,000 square feet. It's situated in kind of a linear orientation with along Institute Road there. There will be two main entrances to the building. There will be a south entrance that faces Institute Road and serves a visitor parking area and bus drop-off area along Institute Road there. And then in back, we have a north entrance, which is going to serve the larger parking lot to the north of the street that steps up the hill a little bit. And both of these entrances will provide access to a main student commons area in the building. And this student commons area is designed to be kind of the heart and soul of the school and the hub of student activity. And the way the building is being situated now is the high school, the academic classrooms and labs and so forth will be on the right side of the plan, or the east side of the site. And then in the middle will be the gymnasium, auditorium, the library, which will all be served from the student commons area. And then to the west side and kind of the southern side of the building will be the tech center. I think that, and then some other nice features of this is that there will be some outdoor learning spaces and then maintaining access to the hiking trails that serve the Arms Forest. So there'll be an opportunity for the community to park there and then access those trails. You can go to the next slide. So here's a few renderings of the building. This is a view of the building from the intersection of North Avenue and Institute Road. And I don't recall exactly what all the materials are that the architects are planning, but they're planning to use a lot of brick, which is a typical material used here in Vermont for many years. And then also some stone highlights with native stones found here in Vermont. Go to the next slide. And then this is a view of the north side of the new school, showing the north entrance off of that parking lot. Next slide. Okay, we've got a few interior shots. This is, I think, of a typical classroom or learning space. There's going to be plenty of natural light serving this school. Every classroom will have windows. That was something that came out from our visioning sessions and meetings with various groups and students that everybody said we need to have natural light, something that the downtown BHS does not currently have. Go ahead, next slide. So this is a rendering of the student commons that I talked about. It's going to be a 2-level commons. The south entrance will provide access to the lower level. And then there'll be some stairs that go up to the second level, and that's where the northern entrance will come in, because the building kind of steps up the hill. It's a slope site. But this will be where the cafeteria is, and plenty of spaces for students to meet and collaborate and network and like just hang out. Next slide. And then this is a rendering of the auditorium. We're looking at a 750-seat auditorium. There'll be a balcony and a lower level serving that function. Next slide. This is a rendering, I believe, of the library. It's going to be an open library design, which I think is kind of the trend these days. Again, allowing a lot of space for students to meet and network. Next slide.
Great.
All right.
Thanks, Joe. So that's a quick overview, getting an idea of what the building is going to look like. There's a lot more of design work to come, as you can imagine, particularly on the inside spaces. So these are concepts, but it hopefully gives people a feel of kind of what we're trying to construct here. I'm going to talk a little bit about the financial impact, which is obviously a major consideration for a project of this size. For starters, I think it's important to understand that the way we pay for something like this is to borrow money. You issue a bond, a tax exempt bond, and that's the kind of question that is on the ballot in November. Provided that passes, we then borrow the money to pay for the work that gets done, and we pay that money back over time, just kind of like if you have a home mortgage, for example, or a car loan, you're paying back that principal. So on an annual basis, once we've borrowed all the money necessary for the project, if it's that full 165 million, we're estimating that there'll be an annual cost of the budget of a little over $11.5 million. And what that means to taxpayers, all those of us in the room, probably, I think everyone here probably lives in Burlington, is a real tax increase over time of potentially up to 15.5%, give or take. That has impact, obviously, on those who pay their education taxes on the basis of their income. We've provided an example here that on a $370,000 home, that could be a little over $800 a year. And on the next slide, we'll see a little chart that describes, gives kind of a range based on home prices. But one common misconception, sometimes people think that, if I get an income credit, somehow my taxes won't go up if the school district spends more. That's not the case. There is an impact there, but obviously it's a different impact, and it's a system designed to provide credits to people of up to a certain income level. So we have provided an estimate here, again, as an example, for a family income of $50,000, that the cost could go up by as much as $190 a year for their education taxes. So on the next slide, and I know it won't be very readable on the screen, so I just direct people to take a look at this on the website, but we provide a range of impacts, and I'm actually not sure, I don't think that one is on our supporting documents. Let me see here. No, it isn't, but it is online. A range of impacts. I'll just give people a few highlights kind of going up, right? We estimate that if the house site value is $500,000, that could be as much as $91 a month, or a little less than $1,100 a year. And the chart goes all the way up to $700,000, which is $127 a month, or about $1,500 a year. So that gives a little sense of the range there. And again, I'd encourage people to take a look at that, and at least you can kind of get a ballpark sense of what it would mean if you are a homeowner. On the next slide, please. And we also provide a little chart that shows the phasing in of this borrowing, because we're not going to build this thing overnight. The goal is to have the school open in August of 2025. And that means that we're not going to need all of the money immediately. So we are going to access the money probably over a period of 3 to 4 years, which means that the full tax impact won't be felt all at once. It won't happen all at the beginning. It won't even happen all at once, right? It'll be phased in over a few years. And so we've provided a kind of estimated borrowing schedule here that shows the tax impact in the first year that we have borrowed funds and that we begin repaying them, of going up about 2.85% property tax rate increase, increasing then to the 9.5% and ultimately up to a little over 15.5% once we have fully borrowed all those funds. We then begin paying or continue paying back those funds. These are likely to be 20-year bonds. That's what the estimates are based on. And as those bonds expire, obviously the tax rate, all else being equal, starts to decrease. And one more slide I think we have. Maybe two. I spoke briefly about this before. We are committed to reducing the cost to taxpayers as much as possible. And through a number of fundraising efforts, we've already identified $35 million worth of other types of funds that can be used to support the project, reducing the need to borrow, including, I mentioned the ESSER funds already, and the reallocation of capital funds. Relocation of some of those programs brings $10 million from the grant for the tech center. So we're working hard, and we're going to continue to work hard. I think that's one other important thing to emphasize is, even with a successful bond vote, we don't have to borrow all that money, which means that we can potentially reduce the impact on taxpayers by continuing to bring in other funds, whether that's funds related to the PCB mitigation efforts, which we are looking at a number of federal opportunities to potentially do that, including getting a brownfields designation. And it also means that there are funds out there that we're going to try to bring in to support various parts of the project. For example, there can be collaboration with Burlington Electric Department for incentives around energy efficiency for the building to reduce the cost of the building, not only upfront to us, but obviously the operating costs year after year after year. So we're excited about that opportunity as well. And lastly, just an updated timeline here. So we have we have a town hall coming up September 21st for folks who want to, again, get similar information, have an opportunity to ask questions. We have September 26th is the last day that ballots can be mailed in if you plan to vote by mail. November 8th, the bond vote, and provided that it passes, we would expect to begin demolition potentially as early as December, more likely January. We would start knocking down the old buildings there to pave the way for construction to begin in June 2023. I do want to say that the district is on a pretty ambitious timeline for this project. So folks probably pay attention to the news. There are issues with getting supplies, materials, contractors right now. Like there's been a lot of uncertainty around some of those things with respect to responding from COVID and then the other global events that are happening. So we believe this is still a realistic timeline. We think it can happen, but folks should understand that it's also aggressive. We think it's necessary because our students are in a temporary space in the downtown mall at this point, but or the Macy's building, but we believe it can be achieved, and we would, like nothing more than to be welcoming students into the new building in August 2025. So that's where we are. Why don't we pause there for questions, and potentially as well, if Claire or Jeff notice anything I missed, I'm sure they'll chime in too. Plan B if the bond doesn't come through. Great question. So most likely what plan B would be to revise the design. If we've assumed that it didn't pass because people felt that it was too expensive, we would probably revise the design, try to find other ways to cut costs. That could mean making a smaller building, cutting out some of the elements of that building in order to go back to the community and bring forth another bond proposal. That would obviously that would cost money just to go through that redesign effort as well. But it may be necessary. I mean, unfortunately, staying where we are right now in the downtown space is not an option. We don't own that building. We have a limited term lease, and it is a good emergency space for students to be learning in, but it is not a good long-term high school. It lacks some really basic elements that a high school, in our community would expect to have.
Have you done any analysis on the impact for renters? I know that's a harder thing to calculate, given the fact that the landlord will get the property tax increase, and will pass that along, presumably in the form of rent. But a lot of us are renters, not me, but a lot of Burlingtonians, and I'm curious if you've done that analysis.
Yeah, it's a good question. There isn't really a good way for us to do that analysis. I think you explained it perfectly.
I know it's hard, yeah.
But there's no doubt that there would be an impact on renters because landlords typically are going to be passing on some of those costs. So it's important to know that there is a different tax rate applied to those buildings and to the landlords who own them. And then, of course, a number of market forces will kind of coalesce to determine how much of that cost they will pass on to renters. So it's definitely a fair question. I regret not being able to kind of give you a more detailed answer. Folks who are renting do have the ability to apply for a renter rebate, similar to kind of the education income tax credit. But at the end of the day, we're talking about an increase for those payers as well, even if it's an indirect one.
Is the pass fail 50% +1 or?
Yes. Yep. That's a good question. It's a different standard than the municipal bond, which is 2/3. For the school district, it's 50% +1.
What about the cost of the bond? How is that?
You mean the cost of like issuing the bond and so forth?
Well, the interest you're going to pay on the bond, right?
Yeah. So I'll talk through it here. So when I talked about that annual cost to the budget of being about $11.6 million, that's repayment of both principal and interest. Right. And so we would every year, we would build that money into our budget. And it's because we've built that into our budget that our education taxes are going up because our local budget is higher.
Claire, I see Claire has a question.
Jeff, if there's anything else that you would like to say, otherwise I'm happy to speak to this.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks, Claire. I actually think that I'm Jeff Wick. I am the one of your school commissioners with Claire Wool. I'm also the vice chair of the school board. Claire and I have been serving on the school board together for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years now together. One of the things I want to discuss, or at least mention, is I think we've assembled the best folks we could possibly bring together, the smartest people, the most experienced people from architects, engineers, and others. And it's given me as a school board member, a volunteer, right? Just layperson, if you will, a fair amount of confidence that we are not overbuilding, that we are doing this as right as possible, given the uncertainties, the inherent uncertainties. And I actually am very pleased with the folks, Joe and Nathan. We've been very lucky to have Nathan as what I'll call our district's chief financial officer since I've been around. And we have, thanks, I think, at least in large part to Nathan's good fiscal management, delivered modest surpluses each and every year I've been on the school board. And so I think we'll continue to provide a very professional level of management and oversight over this project. I think I will admit it's not a project that any of us really wants to do from a pocketbook standpoint. We were all incredibly disappointed to discover that the PCB contamination was such that we could not safely re-enter the building, and to further discover that it would not be economically feasible to remediate the existing building, that it would be throwing effectively good money after bad. So given those unfortunate constraints, I think the folks we have hired and retained to help us navigate this project are doing a very good job. And I think we're being as fiscally prudent as we can be. I'm not excited as a Burlington taxpayer to take out the $165 million bond. And I am hopeful that between now and the time we actually need to draw down the money, that there will be potentially some other pots of money that we can draw from, as outlined in some of these materials. Incidentally, were those materials? Yeah. So we got 2 sheets here, which I've just read over, and I thought, wow, that's right on. So I encourage you to read these, but I am hopeful, given some uncertainty, that we won't have to draw on all of that, as Nathan mentioned earlier. And we've built in a substantial contingency in that 165. So, you know, there are never any guarantees, but I'm also hopeful that we've overbuilt a contingency. But, you know, given the inflation environment, it's hard to tell. But one thing we have promised not to do is to go back to the well and ask for more. We are going to do our absolute very best to bring the project in on budget and, you know, God willing, on time. And we've been very fortunate that Macy's was empty at the time we needed it. A friend said, "What would you have done? What was your plan B?" We don't have one. And most other cities and towns in this state don't have one. And as you may know, the state has started testing for PCBs in all schools of a certain area across the state. I think we're just the beginning of this. And it's unfortunate, but I think once you get through the phases of grief here on this, at least I'm just speaking for myself, I'm now pretty excited, very excited about the possibility of this new high school. You know, unfortunately, not for my kids, probably not for your kids, but for the city of Burlington and the families and the generations to come. So I'm very optimistic. Incidentally, I do, of course, hope you'll vote yes on the ballot item when it comes up, when you get your ballots in the mail. I'm happy to take any other questions as well. Yeah, sure.
Given that there will probably be delays in construction, what is the term for the lease of Macy's?
Right now, I've recently reread the lease. I think we can, right now, I'm pretty sure we're pretty equally matched to our start date, but if there is a delay, we are going to have to negotiate an extension to that.
And we pay $1 million a year in education dollars.
I can translate. I think she said we pay, Claire, did you say we pay $1 million a year in rent for the, actually Nathan would know. Is
Yeah,
that roughly? what
it's
the
more
rent
more
is?
than that,
More than that,
actually.
okay.
Yeah, now I think we're
Oh,
Anyway,
that's right. After the first.
incidentally, rent's not cheap, as we all know. But yeah, we'll do our best to get in on time, and a worst case is we're going to have to extend that lease one way or the other.
Can you fix the audio so that I can speak?
Sounds
How
like
to-
it may be a connection problem, like a
Turn it down?
bandwidth issue.
No?
Yeah,
we
better.
can hear you, Claire. It's just a little choppy. You may want to turn off your video.
Okay, thank you.
We'd be happy
Better?
to take any other questions, but we don't want to dominate the evening. There are other
Yeah,
interesting
I
things going
appreciate
on.
that. I see Mary has her hand raised. Maybe we have one or two more questions and then we're gonna move on to the next topic.
Awesome.
Mary, go ahead.
Yes, okay. So this is Diane Gayer. I'm here with Mary Twitchell. And going back to the amount of money spent being proposed for a new building. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
And my question goes to how green and forward thinking is this building for this amount of money?
That's a
And
great,
are we really talking about solar collectors on the roofs, like should be happening across all of our schools? Are we talking about natural materials within the classrooms? Are we looking at proper ventilation? I know some of these ventilation is that's by code, but really, how forward thinking is this building for this amount of money?
I think Joe, do you feel like maybe the right fellow among the three of us to answer that question?
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to give that a try. I mean, we are pursuing a LEED certification for the building, so it will be, sustainable, energy efficient building. With really large R factors for insulation, and the building materials will meet the LEED certifications as well. As far as solar collectors, we are talking to a third party solar provider, the party that owns the solar collectors that are on the old high school now, to continue doing that, to provide solar on the roof of the new building, and possibly on some of the grounds.
Okay, so
Yeah.
if I look to the Davis Center at UVM, which is now quite a few years old, it was LEED certified, and I think it got a silver. And it got a silver despite being a building on steroids, i.e. overbuilt for what it needs to do, as well as gaining credits by absconding with other credits from other buildings. So LEED certified to me is not as good as we can get when we're spending $65 million for a future building that represents the city of Burlington and the education of our students.
Yeah, a
So
couple other
That's
features
the-
that we can just, in addition to the LEED certification, which is really just kind of confirmation that we built to an efficiency standard. Other things that we're exploring include the building's going to have a geothermal in it. It is likely to be net zero ready. It may not be net zero when it opens, but the hope is that with improvements of technology and other innovations, we actually could have a net zero building by as soon as 2030 potentially even, and that essentially means that the site's generating the energy that it needs to operate. So that is a conversation that is going to continue with BED that we're hoping for. We have high hopes for, and I think it's also important to understand that in addition to the kind of energy efficiency elements of the building, that we've also been intentional about making sure that it has connections to the natural space around the building to allow students not only to hopefully have a good experience within the building, but also to be able to use that campus in the form of outdoor classrooms, connections to the arms forest, and so forth. So we're thinking about not only the energy efficiency in that narrow sense of the environmental impact of the building, but also kind of how we can more broadly make that building a kind of space for students to learn about their environment from an energy point of view, but also just about the setting and so forth.
I appreciate the outreach effort of the educational component to that. And I believe some of that is already in place. I wonder, though, knowing that, I mean, I'm not totally together with the climate action plan of Burlington, but I think that the date lines that you're referring to miss some of the BED and CAP climate action plan for Burlington. You're further out than that. So I should think that it should be opening at net zero impact. And I don't hear that.
No, we're going to be net zero ready, as Nathan said. We hope to be able to. Definition of net zero is produce on site as much energy as you consume. And that is our hope, but not on day one, as I understand it. And I do understand that to some degree, because first of all, the speakers at Mary, I sense your passion, and I think, well, I share it, and those on the board share it, and those whom we've hired have shared it. And I've asked that question, and some of it is a function of money. So if our bond were to be 10, 20, 30 million more, we may be able to do something like that from the get-go. But there have been certain economic efficiency trade-offs that we've had to make. But nonetheless, I can assure you that it's very much in the forefront of our mind. And feel free to email me if you want to, jwick@bsdvt.org, with your specific recommendations. And I can take it back to our architectural and engineering team and get you some further answers. But I do like where you're going with this because we all believe in it. We need it.
Sorry, I can't, and I am Diane Gayer. I'm partner with Mary Twitchell. So just to clarify who's speaking.
Jeff Wick.
And Diane. This question about the school building and its future and its redesign and its now new design has been a long one. And it's hard for me to swallow that you're saying if we spent 30 million, I heard.
Well, don't quote me on that. Incidentally, I was just throwing out numbers, but it would be substantially more.
I don't buy that. This is the moment to question what we're spending and how, and get what we want for the future.
Yeah, totally understood. And like I said, I think we are, well, send me an email. I can get your questions answered. Happy to pick that up.
I don't have a question. I'm asking why the design isn't meeting this.
I think it is meeting it, actually. It's going to be, we're going to have everything ready for solar on the roof.
Not good enough. That's not good enough. It has to be now.
Now. Okay.
Sorry.
All right.
Well, this is there's not a good point to end this conversation. It's an important discussion. I think this topic in particular is very close to a lot of us and our passions. And I appreciate the comments, Diane. We're going to have to leave it here for now. We have the rest of the agenda that we've kind of delayed here by about 15 minutes. Thank you, Claire and Jeff and Nathan and Joe and Russ, I think. We will hope to have another update soon. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Okay, moving to our next agenda topic. So
You
joining us
bombed.
tonight, Deputy Chief of Operations, if that's the right title.
Yes.
Wade
Mhm.
Breck of the Burlington Police Department. Here to talk to us about kind of the status of public safety and security. I think we've heard some concerns from Ward 6 residents, very specific ones about bike thefts and car break-ins. Sorry, did I say?
I already said 6 residents.
Oh, Ward 6 residents. Yeah, sorry, that's the meeting.
If you don't mind, I'm gonna go sit up there so I don't feel like I'm talking to people like.
Yeah, please do. And yeah, general trend staffing issues.
Yep.
I know we were seeing, there's a lot of topics to talk about, so please take it away.
So I have an update. I think that might answer some folks' questions or might generate some more questions, but thank you. My name is Wade LeBrecq. I'm the Deputy Chief of Operations. So what does that mean? That means all the folks that are in uniform. That's the side of the building that I run. The other deputy chief position is the administration, and he runs our dispatch records and detective unit. So that's kind of the division of labor, you could say. I was born and raised in Burlington, just so folks know. I grew up on Buell Street, corner of Hungerford and Hungerford Terrace and Buell, till about the mid-70s, and we were the last family left, and we ended up moving to South Burlington. But I started out with lots of friends and kids in the neighborhood there. I went to Taft School, so that some people might remember that. And my second grade teacher told my mom that I was Miss Heath, I believe her name was, and she said I was a candidate for trouble. That was her word. So my parents put me in Catholic school on North Street. So I went to St. Joe's for a couple of years, and then we ended up moving. So yeah, I'm quite familiar, obviously, with Burlington. I've been a police officer for 22 years now.
Hold the microphone a little closer.
I can talk louder. My wife says I was trying not to, use as my wife says, my cop voice. So, but I certainly can speak up. I don't need the microphone. Yeah, I've been there 22 years. I spent a majority of that before I became a supervisor as a canine officer in this area, in E area. So, between 2008 and 2015, if you saw a police canine car driving around down here, it was probably me. But I've been a deputy chief for 2.5 years now, 2 years. Oh, actually almost 3 years now. Sorry. So just to give you an update, a little historical knowledge of the calls for service or incidents that happen every year. Every time someone calls in or logs online to ask for police service, no matter what it is, it goes into our record system, which is called Valcor, after Valcor Island. And just to give you how busy we've been in the past leading up to now, 2017, we had around 21,841 calls for service. In 2018, we had 19,233. 2019, we were down to 18,396. A lot of that came from the number of car stops we were doing decreased drastically. Then in 2020, we went down to 16,053. That's when COVID started. Last year, 2021, we had 13,511. We were still kind of in COVID, and it was a little slower, as we could say. And so far this year, as of today, I ran the numbers. We are at 16,473. So we're probably back on track for either 2019 or 2018 numbers. So right around 18 to 19,000 calls for service. So far this year, I took the major increases that we've had in crimes. Stolen vehicles are up 541% over a 5-year average. And so far this year, 226 have been reported. Happens to also be my badge number. But that does include not just motor vehicles like a car, but it also includes scooters and mopeds. Those are a large number of the thefts that we have. Unfortunately, gunfire incidents are up 340% over a 5-year average. So going back all the way to 2018. Overdoses are up 146%. Larcenies are up 104%. And that does include bicycle thefts. The way the Valcor system works, which the rest of the state now is on. The categories are very broad, obviously, for reporting, for us to be able to report to the federal government every year. The categories themselves are generalized. So if you say my bike was stolen, that actually falls under a larceny. The system itself is sometimes hard to search for specific data like bike larcenies. But they are up 104%, larcenies are, and the hotspots where most of the bike thefts are happening are in the old North End, the hill section, and the downtown area. Burglaries are up 17%. So those are 5 of the categories that are basically, 4 of them are in triple digits, and the next biggest one was burglaries, up 17%. The rest of it isn't, this percentage that are up is not that significantly, I think, different, because we're coming out of COVID. People are getting out more and stuff like that. So I do have some tips just to put them out there before folks ask questions. When it comes to stolen vehicles, I think the biggest one I could tell people, or to spread with your neighbors and friends and family, don't leave your spare keys in the car. That's probably the number one, close to the number one reason why we have a huge number of car thefts, is people leaving their spare key in the car, leaving the keys for the car in there, or leaving their valet key. I know that's not a big thing up here, but a lot of cars have valet keys that you may have forgotten about, but people that are stealing the cars are not forgetting about that. The other one is don't leave your car running with the keys in it, locked or unlocked, and do something for, and I've seen this quote numerous times, just a second. We had one gentleman who was stealing cars. He learned quite quickly. He was good to go to the Cumberland Farms on either Pine Street or Riverside and just wait. And sooner or later, somebody would drive up, hop out, run in to get a coffee, or if he was really lucky, one guy filled his gas tank up first, left the keys in it, then went inside. So they had a full tank of gas. A lot of people pulled up with the car actually running, and most of the unlocked and running. And most of the times that person also tended to leave their firearm in the somewhere in the car. We watched one when we got the video surveillance. Guy drives up in his really nice truck running, jumps out. We watched somebody ride up on a bicycle, lean the bike up, go over, look in the truck, get in the truck, drive off with the truck and a firearm. So that was a surprising another one. And then here's one that a lot of people don't think about. I live out in Jericho, so it's kind of out in the sticks, and I have dogs. But leaving your keys near an entrance to your, on the inside of your house, but near an entrance to your home, like in your mud room, or if someone's going around at night trying doorknobs and breaks in, they're usually looking for your wallet or your purse, but also people leave their keys. We've had people wake up in the morning, wallet's gone, keys are gone, car's gone. So making sure your doors are locked and hanging your keys up, or putting them somewhere where they're not, like someone walks in, oh, there's a set of car keys. Or if you have like a little rack where you hang all your keys. We've had a few of those. So those are any chance I've gotten to be on the news, I've tried to put those helpful hints out there, and it usually whatever I said that part gets chopped out because it's not really that glamorous. Stolen bikes, we've partnered with the city. I know there's a national registry for bicycles, but one of the biggest problems we have is we have encounters with people all the time, and people are like, oh, that's my bike, I know it is, what's the serial number? I don't know. So we go out with this person, it could be that person's bike, we run the serial number, and it comes back to nobody. So one of the biggest things you can do is have, once again, spread the word, write down your serial number, or have them write their serial number down somewhere and keep it somewhere in your house. So you have a password book, which probably isn't a good idea, but I have one too. But write your serial number for your bike, serial number for your computers. You know, anything that has a serial number. We have a lot of stolen property that we do recover, and we can never find the owners because we have no way to match it up. And a serial number is a really good way. We also, on our BPD website now, you can click on the left-hand side, there is a little tab that says services and guidance. If you click on that, it drops a drop-down menu. And on that, you'll see register a bike. And there's a form you can fill out on there. It has your name, your address, phone number to contact you at, your serial number. You can upload a picture of your bike. You can upload a picture of your serial number. But you know, name, phone number, and serial number, if you can put that much in there, and a picture does help. That would, you know, we would probably be able to return a lot of bicycles, especially when.
Required in Burlington?
No, you're not
In many
required.
cities, you have to register your bike.
No, there's no bike registry. We don't require it. That,
$30 anywhere else.
oh, that's beyond my my capability. But you know, just registering your bicycle is in putting that serial number in there, your name, the serial number, and your phone number. If you don't want to put the rest of it, I'm fine with that. But that would really help out a lot with the stolen bicycles. I talked about gunfire being up. I just wanted to let you know that we've made arrests in the last 3 gunfire incidents that just occurred. We had one male we arrested that was responsible for 2 of them. One was the one down here on Shelburne Road when that caused an accident as well. The operator was shot through the back seat and then crashed. And then the very next night there was a gunfire incident in front of Burn Gallery at the corner of basically Main Street and St. Paul. That guy was responsible for all 3 of those shootings. And he's been caught and he's now waiting trial or, waiting trial. He's been held without bail so far. The one at Perkins Pier, we just arrested a female 2 days ago for the shooting that occurred at Perkins Pier. We do have somebody in custody that we're looking at for the homicide that occurred over on Luck Street. And overall, in my last 22 years, there's not been anybody who has been murdered in the city that has not had the person who murdered them caught. I dare anybody to find another large city in a state, and we're small compared to other, but that has that kind of track record. So overall, and I didn't dig going back, but if somebody's been shot, like physically hit with a bullet, we have, I would dare say, caught the person who's done that, whether it was a homicide or it was just aggravated assault and the person was hit with gunfire but lived. So overall, our detective bureau has a really, really good record of catching the folks that do these, that commit these crimes. It's not, unfortunately, I really wish it was like TV and it only took like 50 minutes or 53 minutes, right? 7 minutes of commercials. But it does take a lot longer than that. And the fact that a lot of these we've already solved this year is a pretty good indicator. Hopefully that can, at least allay some of your fears that these people are still going to be running around out there doing this. Like I said, I like to think we do a pretty good job doing that. So that kind of rolls in my last thing. Last 2 things I can talk about staffing. So just to give you a picture of, in June of 2020, we had a total of 92 police officers working at the Burlington Police Department. Now that includes all the police officers, all the detectives, all the supervisors. As of today, we have 61 police officers working. To give you another picture, in 2020, the Uniform Service Bureau that I run, all the cops in uniforms, we had 45 of them. Today, I had 21. So we talked about earlier in June, or say for the year of 2020, there were 16,053 incidents. When those incidents come in, almost every single one of those goes to a uniformed officer first. So if you have a burglary, the officer is the one who's probably going to show up and take the initial report, maybe take some evidence, maybe have our ID unit come take some evidence. That may get turned over to a detective if it's a spree of burglaries, which is another one we've actually been pretty good at, is catching the burglars too. But it always usually starts with the officer. So they're either responsible to write a report and then it gets sent to like the detective bureau, or they write a report to just close it out because they're responsible for it, or they actually arrest somebody, give them a citation, and then they're responsible for all the court paperwork that goes over to court so the person can be charged. So that averages out to about 357 calls per officer in 2020. Like I said, this year, just of right now, as of right now, we're at 16,473. I have 21 officers working. That's 784 calls per officer. So I've lost over 50% of our uniformed officers, and they've pretty much doubled the number of incidents they're required to go to. So to say that our officers are at the breaking point is probably an understatement. Now, there's been, there are other resources perhaps that we could have looked at. Our detective bureau, there's 10 detectives. There's 5 that are in the general detective. They investigate the shootings, burglaries, all that kind of stuff. 2 of them work for the Chittenden Unit for Special Investigations, CUSI, the sex crimes unit. There's 2 assigned over there. And then we have a drug unit. We have 3 in there, but 1 is on military leave. The other 2, one of them works also as a task force agent. He's still a Burlington officer, but he works for the DEA, and he's paid, correct me if I'm wrong, Jay, he's paid by the DEA, I believe, for some of his work. But he's actually very important to have when we do drug work, because then we not only can usually have state charges, but federal charges as well. And so that leaves 1 drug unit guy to kind of work the city. And we've assigned a officer from the road in 8-month stints just to keep the drug unit open. Because if we didn't have that officer from the road working in there, the drug unit most likely wouldn't, he would just get pulled back into general. But even those officers, those 5 or 6 that are in there, like, why not put them in uniform and put them back on the road? Then we'd have nobody to solve the shootings. Most of those detectives have a couple of shootings each. So even the ones that, maybe it was just an exchange of gunfire, no one was hit, we still have made arrests on those, or those are still being investigated. So I don't really have anywhere to go from there, which leads to, I'm sure everybody's heard about the airport, right? There's police officers at the airport. That is actually a federal regulation. There has to be, the federal government requires any officer that's working at the airport, or any, if you want to call them security, have to be able to enforce state laws. And they also have to be able to arrest for state laws. So TSAs have no law enforcement powers. Federal agents don't enforce state laws. So it is Burlington Police. We are the final, like most of their plans there, they have plans for all sorts of stuff, but the last thing in there usually is called BPD. So we're required to have a certain number of officers for each checkpoint that's open. And in fact, I think we say this out loud, we probably get away with a little bit because the ticket counter actually counts as a checkpoint when they screen your bags and the containers back there. But each checkpoint where you go through, the TSA checks all your bags and stuff, those have to have an officer available to respond to them. So 2 officers have to at least be working during the day to respond to those checkpoints. I did eliminate the midnight shift out there, and that gained me an officer downtown. So between midnight and like 3:30 in the morning, because the first officer actually arrives on scene to work, the gates open at like 4 a.m. Between that point right now, there's no police officer working the midnight shift out there. So we've done what we can with what we have. So going on, people probably heard we had a new contract. We're starting pay right now is $71,000 a year, which is roughly $7,000 to $10,000 more than most of, actually probably any agency in the state of Vermont right now. And a senior corporal who has 15 years on, which is the final step in their pay grades over all the years, in 2025 will make $100,000 a year. So those are incentives that are out there to try to entice people to take up this profession. There's also a $15,000 hiring bonus that's paid out, and I think it's $5,000 increments over 3 years for folks that decide to join us. Those are for an officer who comes in, we call them lateral transfers. They would be somebody who's been an officer either in Vermont, they're certified in Vermont, or they come from another state that the police academy recognizes their certification from. And just to give you an idea how long that takes, we have 3 folks in the academy right now. They will go through 16 weeks down at the police academy. When they graduate from there, they will come back to us, and then they are required to finish 14 weeks of field training. As you probably have guessed, this is a very involved job. There's lots of things that they have to learn. One of them alone can, if they didn't grow up in Burlington, is just learning the streets. We're not gridded off. Like, I lived in Miami. That was a great place. Everything was northwest, southwest, whatever, 15th Street, or it was easy to find your way around. Burlington's a little more like Boston, not that bad, but pretty close sometimes. And if you don't know the area, you'd be surprised a lot of their challenges for folks that are new to the city, that are new officers up here, is just finding themselves from point A to point B. The new North End, everything's named after a tree or a shrub. Even I sometimes, I had my godparents lived up there. I spent a lot of time up there. Every once in a while, I'll be like, Greenbrier, okay, or Woodlawn, or it can be quite challenging. So they have to make it through 14 weeks. So now we're already looking at 30 weeks. So the folks that are in the academy right now, if everything works perfectly for them, they will probably be able to come onto the road at the end of March. We have one officer right now who just got out of the academy. He's in field training right now. Hopefully by the end of December, he'll be able to come on. So that will give me 4 new officers, but not to rain on my own parade. I'm going to lose 3 officers for sure between now and the end of September. So I might gain 1 officer overall. And that's kind of the state of Burlington PD.
That's great. I appreciate
Yep.
the summary. I want to make sure we leave some time for questions. We're running a little bit behind Sam and Miranda and Eli. I know you guys are waiting on. I know Ben Traverse is waiting as well. Are you guys okay if we go a little bit longer? Okay, thank you.
I have a question. Do you feel that the court system is back in action? Like it was prior to the pandemic? And does it have a lot to do with the increase of criminal action? If it isn't?
I think the backlog is not helping because of COVID. But I just saw an article today, I believe, is it maybe the end of this week or next week, but the Judicial Bureau is going to reopen the courthouses. So they're going to lift any restrictions that they had left. So that might help relieve some of that. We also, as a department, have been using the Community Justice Center or alternative justice referrals for nonviolent misdemeanor crimes. That does include like a simple assault when somebody, 2 people get in like a little bit of a fist fight. That is violent. But those will unlawful mischief that aren't expensive, that doesn't have a really high amount of damage. We are pushing those, moving those into the alternative justice system first to help the courts concentrate on the bigger cases and stuff that they needed. So we'll see with the Bureau lifting that, if they do lift it, if that helps them go back to functioning with everybody in the building, everybody working.
First, I want to say thank you for everything you're doing. It's an incredibly tough job and with not nearly enough resources. So thank you for taking the time to be here. I know there's probably a lot of things going on, but we really appreciate everything you and your team are doing. Second question is, do you have a hiring target you're aiming for in terms of kind of your total number of officers you're aiming for?
Yeah, we're aiming for like between 85 and 87. 85, I think, is what we're allowed to hire to now. As anybody here, if you worked in a larger business or something like that, you can never really hit that number, because if you hit 85 and 3 people are going to retire, so you really need to be at like 88 to kind of keep that stasis there. But that's what we're aiming for right now, is to get back up into the 85 to 80, 87. But unfortunately for hiring just in general, like over the whole United States, we're not alone in this. Like most police departments anywhere in the United States, if you ask them, they can't find anybody that wants to enter this profession now. And we're going through a pretty radical change, and necessarily one that we need to do. But it's, where that's gonna go, it's probably gonna, take 3 to 4 years, maybe 5 years total, to get those numbers back. The state of Vermont itself, even the state police are, a good example is the state police always had the most going down to the police academy, like the biggest chunk of the candidates down there. And then Burlington was always the second. Like I had 6 people in my class that were from Burlington in a class of 42, and the state police had, I think, 14. The last class we had 1 in, and the state police we had 2 in, sorry, and state police had 6. That was all they could hire, was 6 people, when they used to have classes of 15. Even a couple of them were big, like up to 20. So when the largest agency in the state is having issues, that it trickles down to everybody else. Thank you. That was a good question. Yes,
This
ma'am.
might be a stupid question, but why do you see this, the lack of interest in this? I mean, what's like the main reason why people?
I think, to be honest, if you go back to George Floyd and the defunding the police and how police are viewed. And I think in general, people are looking at this profession as one that they don't really want to get into and be brought under that kind of microscope.
Okay.
That seems to be kind of the trend, like nationwide.
What are the changes that are being initiated?
Well, yeah, I guess to start with, we actually, and I really glad you asked this question. The de-escalation, the negotiation stuff, we started that before it was the new in thing to do. In 2016, another sergeant and I went down to New York City to the NYPD and sat in a room with police chiefs and lieutenants and from all over the country, Dallas, Seattle, and we were working with the police research executive forum, PERF, police executive research forum, PERF, and we came up with a guideline or a basis for a plan called the Integration of Communication and Tactics, and what that became, everybody calls it ICAT, but what it is de-escalation. And so before any of George Floyd happened and all this de-escalation, we were actually at the forefront down there putting this program together and rolled it out at our department before it was the in thing to do. I'm a negotiator. We have a pretty large negotiating cadre. Fortunately, I haven't lost a lot of them, but our main goal is to slow things down and try to establish a rapport. Now that was, I will tell you, it was a lot easier when there was 90 some odd officers. I'm sure everybody's aware of the officer involved shooting that we had weeks ago. So the officer who shot was a sergeant. He should have been in charge of the scene, not the one providing cover for the other officer who was trying to talk to the person who he had met on other calls and actually had a rapport with. And then the only other officer working, so there was 3 total working on a day shift on a Saturday. He showed up third, and then we didn't have the luxury of being able to have 8 people, 9 people, officers there to set up a perimeter and to keep people back and to use, we have polycarbonate shields that, that's part of our protocols when we have enough officers. So it's we're kind of stuck in a little bit of a catch-22 in these situations, but there's still a group of officers that train regularly. We find a way so they can train, that run our emergency response vehicle, and they're all either half of them are instructors in ICAT, so in negotiations, or they're negotiators themselves. So we're still that's one of the innovations I think that we started ahead of everybody else, and we're still on the edge. Sorry.
No, that's great. So it's I think we'll open this up. I see Mello Granite as one of our police commissioners. Got her hand raised, and then I think we'll move on to the next agenda item after this. Mello, go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Seguino and Comerford were not available this evening, so they just asked me to listen along. I just want to thank DC Lebrecq for his presentation. I think this is really an excellent example of the type of community outreach that we need, giving people information that they need to help prevent crime. Sometimes there's this mythology around what our police officers can actually prevent versus going out and solving. So the more people are aware of what we can do to make their jobs easier by doing more to protect ourselves so certain crimes don't occur, is to be helpful. And in the past, I felt that our department didn't always do a good job of that. And so I'm happy to see this type of outreach continuing. I just wanted to mention biteindex.org. I don't know if the police department is looking at that site at all. I am aware that a lot of Burlingtonians have been using it. So now that we are collecting these registrations, would we want people to be registered in two places, or would the department also use that index? Just a question to take back to talk about internally in terms of messaging. And then I wanted to speak really briefly about, we are having very traumatic times in our country. And there was a great movement of protest after the horrific death of George Floyd, but it wasn't just George Floyd. There were many incidents before, and these incidents have continued after. And there's a great call for reform. So now it becomes, do people want to step up to this moment? Can they step up to this moment? And that's what makes it harder to recruit officers. So please feel free to reach out to me, megrant@burlingtonvt.gov. I would be happy to email people information on issues around recruitment, because I actually read about this a lot. And that's all I really wanted to say. I know you're pressed for time with other items, but thank you very much. And thank you again to DC Lebrecq for his presentation.
Great. And one last quick thing. We did promote 2 new lieutenants. This guy, who I'm going to mention, he's the area lieutenant for E area, so this end of the city. His name is Lieutenant Mai Win. He's been an officer, and he's catching up, so he's like 16 years. I think he's got, 17 years. I think he's getting pretty close to his 20. But he is the area lieutenant. I will have the area lieutenants now posted with their email addresses on the website, on our website, so you can also reach out to the area lieutenant with questions or concerns and stuff as well. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. I appreciate, go ahead. I appreciate folks sticking around and bearing with us as the agenda is stretching out here. Next topic is we're joined by Ben Traverse, City Councilor Ward 5, talking to us about a proposed charter change, I believe, for non-citizen legal resident voting. And I don't know if I got the terminology exactly right, but Ben, you can.
All right, thanks, Nelson. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Great. So I'll do my best to get you as close to back on schedule as possible here. I appreciate your having me. Thanks for hosting that great discussion with DC Lebrecq. My name is Ben Travers. I was recently elected as the new city councilor for Ward 5, and I serve on the council's charter change committee, among others, but it's my position on the charter change committee that has me here this evening. Folks may remember that 7 years ago in 2015, there was a ballot measure put out there to allow for non-citizens, legal resident, but non-citizens to vote in local elections, as well as to hold positions on city boards and commissions, including the city council. That failed before the voters in 2015, roughly 58% to 42%. The council looked at the issue again in 2020, but decided at that point in time not to put the question on the ballot to voters. Back in 2015 and 2020, there was a lot of discussion around why these measures failed and why the council had apprehension back in 2020 to put it on the ballot. And a good amount of it revolved around some feedback and some concerns that folks felt like they hadn't had enough opportunity to consider the issue, to really understand it, to understand what its impact would be, not the least of which on those it would impact the most, which is non-citizens who would gain the opportunity to vote in our local elections. Since 2015, 2020, there's been other Vermont communities that have enacted all resident voting. It happened in Montpelier. It happened most recently in Winooski. So with other Vermont cities and towns considering the issue, we felt as the Charter Change Committee that this year presented a good opportunity for us to reapproach the issue. But we're approaching it very carefully and are very mindful of not wanting folks to, if we were to put it on the ballot, which this would be for town meeting day next year, March of next year, wanting to ensure that folks have had a full opportunity to provide feedback, to ask any questions about it, and to fully understand what the measure would accomplish. So the counselors on the Charter Change Committee are going around to all of the NPAs. We've been working closely with CEDO, which has been assisting us in working with a number of community stakeholders, particularly in local immigrant communities, to have discussions with them about what the impact of this would be if we were to put it on the ballot and it were to pass. And would love to hear your feedback or receive your questions. Certainly, if we have time this evening, we could discuss it now, but also would welcome your reaching out to us on the council, or I'm sure we'll no doubt continue to have meetings on this as a Charter Change Committee and then as a full council. So just very briefly here, just as the ballot measure would have done in 2015, if the council puts a proposed charter change measure on the ballot in March and voters vote in favor of it, it would allow for all legal residents, regardless of their citizenship status, to vote in local elections. So what does that mean? It means your local positions like city council, school board, your ward clerks and inspectors of election. And it would also allow non-citizens to serve on local Burlington boards and commissions. We don't have authority as a city to extend voting rights beyond local elections. So it would only be with respect to local candidates and local questions that non-citizens would be able to vote on. If voters approved it in March, it would have to, as a charter change, then go to the state legislature. It's possible that they would consider it in the next session. If not, it would come up in the session after that in 2024. But I would anticipate that if we put this, again, question on the ballot in 2023 and voters approved it, that come the next local election, whether that be that November or whether it be in March of 2024, that all legal residents, regardless of their citizenship status, would be able to vote. So that is what we are working on as a committee. Wanted to bring that to you all as the Ward 6 NPA. Again, happy to hear your feedback or to answer any questions you may have.
Do you have any numbers?
As to how many people would be impacted by this?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we're not entirely certain with respect to that. I will tell you that in Winooski, since they enacted all resident voting, relatively few people have come forward to register to vote since then, but they are working on it. I apologize for not having the numbers right in front of me right now. I can look it up as to what the exact number of eligibility would be, but that is a number we have been considering.
I just following on that, I wonder if there is clarity about what particular areas of the city non-resident voters would be concentrated in, or if there is a concentration.
Yeah, it's another good question. I think it's another question that we've been looking into. Where you find the highest concentration of non-citizens is in the city's more diverse neighborhoods. So you do find a higher concentration of non-citizens in the Old North End, for example. In Ward 5, there are certain neighborhoods where there is a higher concentration of non-citizens who would be eligible to register to vote under this. There are certain wards where it would impact voter numbers potentially more than others.
And just to follow on that, what about college and university students who may be registered to vote otherwise in other places? That is to say, not in local elections in other places. Would they be eligible to vote in local elections here if they were from Illinois and voted in national and state elections in Illinois?
That's a very good question. A question that has not come up yet. It's a good point though, because obviously, if Burlington were to stand up this system, we would register legal resident non-citizens ourselves. It's not a system that would go through the states because folks would not end up on the state voter rolls. So it's a very good question, and it's one that I'll certainly take back and get you an answer on. Thank you.
Can I ask one? Hey, Ben, this is Matt Grady. Thanks a lot for presenting. Is the ballot item going to be worded just the same as the one that didn't pass? And if it is, do you have reasonable feedback about why it didn't pass the first time and how we can work against that? Work to get a better result.
Right. So to answer your first question, we've agreed on language that would end up on the ballot, and it's not the same as it was in 2015. Instead, the language pretty much mirrors the language that was on the ballot in Winooski. And there's a couple reasons for that, not the least of which is that Winooski voters passed that. It went through the legislature. It was enacted, and they did not run into any legal hurdles, at least at the legislature, at the legislative level. So it's tried and true language, and that is what we are basing it off of.
Okay, you answered my question. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah. And then just as to your other question, why didn't it pass back in 2015? I think there's various reasons. If Burlington had done this in 2015, we would have been the trailblazer really in Vermont with respect to this issue. I think that there were a lot of questions then that don't necessarily exist now, in part because Montpelier and Winooski have already gone forward and done this. Obviously, the world has changed quite a bit in the last 7 years as well. I think folks are looking at democracy and participation in voting in our systems of government more or differently now than they did 7 years ago. And so we thought if there seemed to be more interest this time around than in 2015, that now presented a good opportunity for us to reapproach this.
All right, thank you.
Ben?
Yeah.
Excuse me, thank you for joining us. I think we'll leave it there and folks can contact you, and I'm not sure who else is on the Charter Change Committee with additional questions.
Yeah, so please feel free to email me, btravers@burlingtonvt.gov. There are two other counselors on the Charter Change Committee, Jean Bergman from Ward 2 and Sarah Carpenter from Ward 4. We will continue to meet as a Charter Change Committee to discuss the issue. Our meetings are posted online. This would not be put on the ballot as well until it went back to the full council certainly your counselors and Council President Paul and Counselor Shannon would at that point in time have an opportunity to vote on it and weigh in. So stay tuned. And thank you very much for the questions. You've raised a couple new issues for me here that I will get back to you on. And I will also would be happy to email you all for the minutes, the information we have as to the percentage of folks who may become eligible to vote if this were to go through.
That'd be great. Thank you.
All right. Thanks very much. Have a good night all.
Thanks, Ben. Okay, last but not least, thank you for your patience, all of you. Where would be best for you all to sit? Up front here?
Sure.
Perfect. So the last agenda topic is discussion about a new, and you'll correct me if I go wrong here, but a new multi-unit housing development on South Winooski Avenue. So we're joined tonight by Marika Skaz. Am I saying that?
You are? Yeah, nice.
Perfect. Okay, the Champlain Housing Trust, Sam Beal, and Eli Marosher.
You got it.
All right. Worry about that. Here to tell us a little bit more about the project.
Great, thank you, Nelson. Sure. Need a minute to put up?
And sorry, guys, one more question. Will you guys be flipping slides or? Okay.
Yes.
Yes, so I think we need to be promoted to be a presenter.
Okay. I think it's Duncan.
Yep. All right.
So maybe.
Would you like the street elevation as you speak?
No, maybe just start with that.
Site plan?
Okay, that's fast. Okay, I think we're all set. Thanks for having us tonight. As Nelson said, my name is Miranda Lascaz. I'm from the Champlain Housing Trust. And I'm here with Eli and Sam from our architect team at Duncan Wisniewski Architecture. Also working on this project is their colleague Taryn, who wasn't able to be with us tonight. And I think on Zoom, I've got a couple colleagues from the development team too, Kirsten Merriman Shapiro, Ben Schertz, and Amy Donor. So got a team here that we're excited to tell you about this proposed project that is at 176 South Winooski Ave. That we are working in partnership with the VFW on a possible redevelopment of their site. So I'll start with just talking about the evolution of this proposed project, and I'll then turn it over to the architects to tell you a little bit about the design to date. We're at early stages, so we're really kind of talking about project concept for the building, and welcome your thoughts and feedback. So as I mentioned, we're working with the VFW. The VFW Howard Plant, I'm blanking on the number right now, but Howard Plant 178, I believe. Yes, is the VFW post that's at this address at 176 South Winooski. And they approached CHT, Champlain Housing Trust, about possibly redeveloping the site because their current building has maintenance needs. And at the same time, the VFW membership is changing, and the post saw an opportunity to get some development assistance to maybe launch a new era for the post and contribute to the affordable housing crisis at the same time, and also maybe even find new ways to support veterans in the community. The VFW post is the first in the state and has had their home at this location since 1979. And the site has a really interesting history. It's very close to, and it seems to clip the historic Burlington Ravine, which some of you may know about. It was once an orchard. And before the VFW moved to that location, the site was owned by the city. So our concept is a 5-story building. The first floor we would develop to house nonprofit commercial space. And we would then have 4 floors of housing above. The first floor concept right now is to create those 2 spaces for nonprofit entities. These are tentative entities that would be in these spaces, but right now we're working with the VFW on a possible condominium that they might choose to buy so that they can continue to have a home at this location for their gatherings, office needs, and also for veteran services programming. And then the other nonprofit space is tentatively for the city's Community Justice Center, which you just heard police LC, I wasn't sure his standing, but Lebrecq talk about that is really instrumental to the city's justice and justice programming. So they would lease the second ground floor space. The upper floors will house 38 apartments and support spaces for those apartments like a property manager office, a community laundry, and a community room for gathering. And because of the special partnership with the VFW, we plan to set aside 5 of the apartments for veterans that are exiting homelessness. So like I mentioned, we have our building concept with you tonight. There's still a lot that we're working out about the site that will certainly drive the design. These are our initial designs, but we're looking into a lot that will help inform that design, like the site stability that influences our structural approach, environmental testing to know more about the soils on the site and the groundwater, construction costs, and elements like that. So the details will change, but we've got a pretty good sense for what the form of the building and the site plan at this stage looks like. So I'll turn it over to Eli and Sam.
Okay.
So my name is Sam Beal. I'm a principal at Duncan Wisniewski Architecture, and I'm pinch hitting today for Taryn, who is not able to join us today. And so primarily my role will be to be Vanna White and show the slides and zoom in as necessary. But I do sit next to Taryn, and I've been observing this project, and it's a great project. Before I turn it over to Eli, who's been working on the project, just want to highlight the fact that this is one of the first projects to really go through the form-based code in downtown Burlington. And so we've been working closely with zoning staff to make sure we meet all those requirements. And they drive a lot of what's going to happen here, both in terms of the materiality, as well as the setbacks from the street, how close we can be to the street, how close we need to be to the edges of the site. And so what you see right here on the site plan are some diagrammatic explanations of these different provisions within the zoning code. And so it's not important for you to understand that unless you truly want to, but I want to just make it clear that a lot of this stuff is baked into our ordinance now. And so we're doing our best to make a beautiful building with this ordinance, but it's something that we have to comply with. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Eli, who can speak in more detail to the design as it is currently.
Yes, that's a good intro because you're about to hear me say the code says about 10 times. In the next,
just 1 second.
Yeah, please.
Is everybody familiar with where we're talking about on South Winooski Avenue?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
What's the South Street? Is that King?
Yes.
Yeah.
South King, yep.
Between
Main and King.
Main and King.
Yeah. Okay, well, then I will just jump into it. Actually, if we could start.
Introduce yourself.
Oh, my name is Eli Marosher. Thought you covered that. And if we could look at the street side elevation, I'd like to start there. Just to give you an initial idea of what we're thinking this building might look like. So something you might notice right away is that the twin functions of that nonprofit commercial space at the ground floor and then the residential space above are expressed as two contrasting but complementary volumes. And then on the north end of the building, that volume, we're thinking brick to connect it to the Main Street, which has so many historic brick buildings. If we could go to the site plan, now is where we get into me saying the code 10 different times. A lot of the footprint is driven by the form-based code. This is defined as a downtown center. And so the code expresses a desire for this to be developed in a way that feels like a vibrant urban development. And accordingly, it specifies side setbacks of 12 feet. And these are maximum side setbacks, not minimum side setbacks. They want the building to stretch along the street frontage. And so, you see that there along South Winooski. Where am I here? Yes, so as far as the depth of the building, although bike parking and storage is integrated into this project, the nature of the current tentative commercial tenants is that they have parking needs. To ensure that sufficient parking, we have really the most efficient parking we can get on the back of the site, as the code calls for. And that specifies that kind of tells us how deep our building can be, which, although the site is pretty tight, that is just about enough depth for nice apartments along a double loaded corridor. So, hallway, apartment on each side along the length of that building, from floors 2 to 5. As for, can we go back to the elevation? I'm sorry. Maybe I should have changed the order of. Yeah, so if we go back to the elevation, as Miranda said, a lot of this thinking is in the early stages. So what you might see here for this material expression is far from set in stone. But we are actively considering what's most appropriate for the character of this neighborhood. And in addition to that, the form-based code has a very specific list of materials that can be used on the facade. Things like brick and natural stone and fiber cement, which we are definitely considering, and you'll see kind of expressed here. The building's height is, the code specifies that it can't be more than 65 feet or 6 stories. Our building is 5 stories. There's a very practical reason for that. The code also specifies that the first story must be at least 14 feet, and we need about 10.5 feet for each subsequent floor in order to fit our mechanical system. So it's really not possible for us to fit 6 stories on this site, given the code. But nevertheless, we're still fitting in these generous nonprofit commercial spaces with 38 units of housing. In addition to that very practical concern, we think it's pretty appropriate to the character of the place there. I mean, it is very close to that intersection with Main Street, very visible from that intersection. And so it's kind of a little bit outside of that downtown core and not quite as tall as some of those buildings along Main Street, but like kind of transitioning, just slightly stepping down and extending that urban character. To close, I just want to reiterate our excitement for the project. I think something we believe is this is central to Burlington, not just in its location, but in its purpose, as Miranda was discussing. And so we hope to make it an important and beautiful addition to the community. And is there...
So yeah, I'd love to hear questions, because part of the purpose of this meeting is to get feedback, because we're still in these early stages. So please go ahead.
And is it taller or equally high as the courthouse?
The courthouse is taller. Yeah, this is right now at about 60 feet. And yeah.
And second part, I don't see any balconies. Why is that?
A private balcony? So these apartments, we don't have space in this building to provide private balconies for each apartment, but there is a community terrace that you can see on the upper right-hand part of your screen that comes off of the community room on the upper floor.
So that would be on the roof?
Correct.
Yeah, that's with very nice views of the Adirondacks.
Will there be gardens on the roof?
There will be plantings, and we're exploring exactly where the landscaping will be, but we've tossed around different ideas for how that roof porch is being expressed and what it looks like. And here it's very much integrated into that volume and just looking like another window, but this is still all being fleshed out.
I don't think I remember how many apartments were going to be there.
38.
38 and only 5 for veterans.
5 will be set aside for homeless veterans. Veterans are certainly eligible for the other apartments, but it's a kind of a set aside. I also want to, thanks.
Thank you.
I'd also like to mention that Michelle Caver from the VFW is also on Zoom, so she's here if we want to address questions to her.
I have just a quick question. Do you have any idea what they'll cost to rent? At
To
this
rent?
point?
Oh, we do have a general sense. I can't give you specific numbers right now, but the main financing source for affordable housing is called low-income housing tax credits. And those restrict eligibility for the apartments to households below 60% of area median income. So it depends on the household size, whether it's a 1, 2, or 3 person household. But generally, median income is around 95,000 per year right now. So 60% of that and below. So that dictates eligibility. And then the rents, again, are, well below market rents, and they're calculated by this program to be affordable to folks at those income levels. Yeah. It'll be a mixed income community. So some of the apartments will be set at that 60% AMI. Others will be higher income. Because it's important to the funders and to ourselves that we create a vibrant mixed income community.
So they will be on the market for sale. Is that what you said?
No, they will be for rent, their apartments.
I see. And how large will they be?
So for this downtown location, we have a unit mix that is primarily 1-bedroom apartments, but it also incorporates 4 2-bedrooms and a couple of studio apartments. Yeah.
What's the community role in this? Are you looking for, is there feedback? Is it eventual approval, or what's involved there?
Yeah, so we always want community input. It's great to talk to the community about projects that we have in kind of the concept stage. It's an opportunity for the community to give feedback, and it's part of Burlington's process to have projects presented before their neighborhood planning assembly before they then go to the zoning office for permitting review.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm Mark Howe. I didn't identify myself earlier, but I walk along that block a lot, and I ride my bike along there, and my wife does too. And that is a rough block. It's hard going through there just because there are a lot of people on the street who are not always very friendly. And so my hope would be that this really would fulfill that goal or meet that goal of kind of bringing community and bringing vibrancy to that block. There's a gas station on one corner, there's community health, there's just a lot happening in there. And if there could be people living along there, that just sounds great to me.
Yeah.
Thanks, we agree. I think, it would really help to activate the streetscape, both with people living there and also vibrant community entities on the first floor.
All in walking distance. Very nice.
Is this a net zero building?
It's unlikely to be net zero. It will definitely be high performance energy track from BED and Efficiency Vermont's multifamily standards. It'll be for their high performance standards. We have difficulty with net zero at this point. I mean, we really pay a lot of attention and really strive for the best air sealing and insulation to invest in the thermal shell, but we often don't have enough room on the roof for solar panels to actually achieve net zero. Yeah.
It's a surface area to volume ratio problem. We have 5 stories of building and only so much roof to put PV on, but there's lots of places to put PV in this state. So it's a community problem at some point. Yeah.
Did you have a question?
Nope, thank you. It's all good there.
So did I hear you say that this is the first project that's going through the form-based code process?
I don't know that it's the first one, but it's one of the first ones. And so we've been working with Mary and Scott at the zoning office to make sure we all understand the code correctly and are interpreting it correctly. Because as you know, you write something, but then rubber hits the road and you actually try to implement the codes, you find things that are vague or gray. And so we're working through those with the city to make sure everybody understands what we
So
need to do.
you've chosen to use a form-based code process because of some advantage to using that process versus.
I believe we
Well,
have
it's
to, right?
required.
It's
Yes.
required.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the zoning code for this portion of the city.
Great, sure.
Thank you.
What was the, it seems like you can kind of read the program in the way the elevation is broken out.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Discuss that. What was in the brick volume kind of on the end?
So on the first floor of that brick volume, we're currently programming it as kind of a community room within that nonprofit commercial space, or more community oriented room. Above it is just it's other 1-bedroom units, just like are in the rest of the building. So that piece of the building is really to connect it to Main Street. Whereas then what you see along the south side is that, as you said, expression of different programmatic function.
I appreciate the effort to kind of like densify the street. And I know that the code is kind of pushing you there anyways, but it looks like the site as it is currently configured, there's kind of a loop of vehicle circulation. all the way
Yes,
around.
for sure. Yeah.
So a little bit less parking lot. Seems great. More housing.
That's right. It'll lose the exit of the current entry drive and a separate exit drive, and entry and exit will be from one drive.
Just one other, I may have missed this before, but what's the, at least us aspirational timeline for it? Is there one?
I'm glad you used the word aspirational. It might not be aspirational, but timelines are never set in stone. We are working through design and permitting now, and funding applications to our various funding sources. If all goes well, we might expect to be fully designed, permitted, and funded this spring, so that we might be able to start construction by spring or summer and be complete in a year or a little bit longer than a year after that. So maybe summer of 2024, it could be complete.
Any other questions? Lost track of the Zoom room. Are there any hands raised? Looks like no. Okay.
All right.
Is that it, or is there concluding comments? No. Okay.
No, thank you very much.
That was great. I appreciate your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks also for your patience, kind of sticking with us to the end of the meeting, as well as everybody here and online. That's the end of this meeting. We'll see you all in October. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you, Willie.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Next to you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.